I'm innocent. I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody.
For nearly 3 decades, fans, investigators, and former insiders have all been trying to figure out the same thing. Who really killed Tupac? Because the deeper people dig into what happened in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996, the more complicated the story becomes. New witness statements emerge. Old interviews suddenly sound different, and podcast confessions reopen questions people thought had already been answered. Then another name gets pulled back into the conversation: Snoop Dogg. Over the years, people started revisiting Snoop's comments about Death Row Records, Tupac's final days, and the growing tension surrounding the label before the shooting happened. This is the story behind the rumors, the fallout, and the questions that still surround Tupac's murder almost 30 years later. Let's get into it. Vegas turns dangerous. September 7, 1996 started like one of the biggest nights in hip-hop history. Mike Tyson was fighting at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and nearly everybody important was there. Tupac, Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight, and even Hollywood star Denzel Washington were all at ringside. It was boiling up to be an iconic showdown at the MGM. However, the fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Tyson knocked out Selden in the first round. For most people in that arena, that was the headline of the night. But for the people connected to Death Row, the real drama hadn't started yet. At that point, Tupac was on top of the rap world. Albums dominating charts, movies, interviews, fame at a level few rappers had ever reached before. He had just finished All Eyes on Me, a double album that sold over 5 million copies within its first few months. He was 25 years old and operating at the peak of his powers. To the outside world, he looked invincible. But behind the scenes, something terrible was building up. The East Coast-West Coast feud was no longer just about music charts or rap lyrics anymore. It had evolved into a culture of paranoia, loyalty, and retaliation. Tupac's shooting in New York in 1994 had permanently changed the way he viewed the people around him, especially figures connected to the East Coast rap scene. After joining Death Row Records, Tupac became the loudest voice in the feud. His interviews grew more aggressive. His music became openly confrontational. By 1996, many people close to the industry later admitted they felt the tension getting out of control. Entourages were moving through clubs, hotels, and award shows, expecting violence at any moment. Then came the hallway fight. Casino cameras showed Tupac Shakur confronting Orlando Anderson inside the MGM Grand after spotting him there. Anderson had previously been involved in stealing a chain from one of Death Row's affiliates, and tensions were already high because of it. Tupac walked up to Anderson, asked him where he was from, and then punched him. Right after that, a huge fight broke out in the hallway. Several people jumped in, security rushed over, and the whole area turned into absolute chaos. After the fight ended, emotions were running high, and according to investigators, some people were already thinking about getting revenge. The entire mood of the night changed in less than 60 seconds. Because what the public didn't know was that across that same casino, Orlando Anderson's uncle, Dwayne Davis, known as Keefe D, had watched the whole thing unfold. And he was already acquiring the weapon that would end the night in blood. And while the blood hadn't been spilled yet, the people closest to Death Row already knew the night wasn't over. Some of them had been watching the walls close in for months. Around 11 that night, Tupac climbed into the passenger seat of Suge Knight's black BMW 750. The plan was simple: drive to Club 662, where a party was waiting. The convoy was large, music was playing, and for a moment, the night felt like it might end normally. But at the corner of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside the BMW at a red light. The back window came down. A .40 caliber Glock fired multiple rounds directly into the passenger side. Tupac was hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh. Suge Knight was grazed in the head but kept driving, flooring the car in the opposite direction before police stopped them blocks away. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center. Surgeons removed his right lung to stop the internal bleeding. He was placed in a medically induced coma. For 6 days, the world held its breath. And on September 13, 1996, at 4:03 in the afternoon, Tupac Shakur was pronounced dead. He was 25 years old, and officially, nobody knew anything. The official story from Las Vegas Metro Police was straightforward: a drive-by shooting, typical gang-related violence and uncooperative witnesses. The department later admitted that it had mismanaged the investigation almost from the start. They discounted the lobby fight. They failed to follow up with their only willing witness before he was killed. They let the trail go cold and publicly acknowledged within a year that the case might never be solved. However, one person's absence on the night it all happened was noticed almost immediately. Snoop pulls away. One detail that has followed the Tupac case for years is Snoop Dogg's growing distance from death row around the time of the shooting. At first, most people ignored it. Snoop and Tupac were genuinely close, not just label mates, but friends. Snoop pushed Suge Knight to bring Tupac to death row. He gave up his own production resources so Tupac could record. He later said Tupac brought a spirit to the studio unlike anyone he'd ever worked with, which makes the distance that followed so hard to explain. By 1996, Snoop was openly uncomfortable. He spoke about paranoia and how the atmosphere around Suge Knight had become volatile. Dr. Dre had already quietly walked away. Death Row no longer looked like a record company. It looked like pressure waiting to explode. Snoop wasn't in Las Vegas when the shooting happened. But when Tupac was placed on life support, he flew to Vegas. He walked into that hospital room and saw his friend intubated, almost unrecognizable. He said he could feel Tupac wasn't even there anymore. He fainted. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, found him in the bathroom and told him to pull himself together, that her son had never seen him weak. He went back in and said goodbye. Tupac died 6 days later. September 13, 1996. He was 25. Within a year, Snoop was gone from death row, not through a dramatic exit, but a quiet arrangement that let him walk away from everything the label had become. He reinvented himself: television, business, a public image built as far from that world as possible. Almost like he understood something had fundamentally changed, or maybe Snoop himself had. But grief and distance are not answers, and answers were the one thing the case refused to give. The witness stories. For decades, Tupac's murder remained trapped between conspiracy theories and dead ends. The Las Vegas investigation stalled almost immediately. Witnesses went silent. In 1997, one of the only people who told detectives he could probably identify a shooter was killed in New Jersey before investigators ever followed up with him. For nearly 30 years, that looked like the truth. Then Keefe D started talking publicly. Dwayne Davis appeared in interviews, documentaries, and podcasts where he openly described being inside the white Cadillac that pulled up alongside Suge Knight's BMW at the corner of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. He said he was in the front passenger seat. He said a .40 caliber Glock moved from his hands to the back seat. He said what happened next happened fast. He told this story to a federal task force in 2008, to Las Vegas detectives in 2009, on a BET docuseries in 2018, and in a self-published memoir in 2019. He told it because, for a long time, telling it cost him nothing. Suddenly, the case felt alive again. Old witness accounts were revisited. Archived footage resurfaced. And that is when names like Snoop Dogg started reappearing in headlines, not because of confirmed evidence, but because every person connected to death row during that era became part of the public's obsession with Tupac's final hours. According to prosecutors, the shooting was not random. It was organized within hours. And if that is true, it raises disturbing questions about just how dangerous things around death row had already become behind closed doors. Because there is a difference between a rumor nobody can prove and a confession nobody can ignore. And Keefe D had been making that distinction disappear for years. The federal pressure. Over the years, federal investigators have repeatedly circled figures connected to the broader death row world, not only because of Tupac's murder, but because of allegations of organized criminal activity surrounding the music industry throughout the 1990s. In September 2023, nearly 30 years after the shooting, Keefe D was arrested outside his Henderson, Nevada home. Police had searched the property 2 months earlier, recovering laptops, photographs, .40 caliber ammunition, and news clippings about the murder going back to 1996. The case, built largely on Davis's own public confessions, was finally strong enough for a grand jury. He was indicted for first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty. His attorneys argued that Davis fabricated his involvement for personal gain, that he talked himself into the center of the most famous unsolved murder in hip-hop history because it earned him book deals and a reputation. They claimed he was never even in Las Vegas that night. But he told the story twice to law enforcement. He told it publicly for 5 years. He put his name on a memoir with specific operational details. And police found .40 caliber cartridges in his home, matching the ammunition used to kill Tupac Shakur. Davis's murder trial is currently scheduled for August 2026, 30 years after the night it all began. And once that arrest became public, every old rumor resurfaced. Suge Knight, Diddy, former bodyguards, death row affiliates, and eventually Snoop Dogg himself. The Tupac Shakur case has become something more than just a story. It's become a legend, a mystery that people never stopped trying to solve. And the strangest part about Tupac's murder is not just that it happened. It is that the story never truly ended afterward. Tupac Shakur's murder remains one of the most discussed cases in history. And every few years, another interview, another witness, another viral clip pulls it back to the surface. But maybe the real mystery was never who pulled the trigger. Maybe it was how many people saw it coming and said nothing. So, after hearing all this, what do you think really happened behind the scenes during Tupac's final days? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one.